Abandoned. The dark history of Disney's secret island. Somewhere inside the most visited tourist destination on the planet, a place that welcomed over 58 million guests last year, there is an island that Disney has never explained, never demolished, and never discussed publicly. It sits in the middle of Bay Lake, less than a mile from Magic Kingdom's glittering castle spires. You can see it from the water taxis. You can spot it on satellite images. Jungle has consumed every building. Wildlife has reclaimed every pathway. A shipwreck from 1974 still rots on the beach. And the Walt Disney Company, worth over $200 billion, has done absolutely nothing about it for 25 years. No press release, no demolition, no redevelopment plan, just silence. This is the dark, forgotten, so deeply strange history of Discovery Island, Disney's secret abandoned island. And once you know the full story, you'll never look at the Magic Kingdom the same way again. Welcome to the History Chronicle, where we excavate the stories that powerful institutions bury. If you're new here, hit subscribe right now, because we go where the official narrative ends and the real history begins. This is one of the most bizarre corporate ghost stories in American history. Let's get into it. Before Disney, before theme parks, before any of it, Bay Lake was just a quiet body of water in the middle of Central Florida wilderness. Hundreds of acres of pine scrub, marshland, and silence. And at the center of Bay Lake sat a small, mostly unremarkable island that barely appeared on any map. Think of it as the wallflower at the party. So nobody noticed it. Nobody cared. And for most of the early 20th century, ownership passed from one forgettable hand to the next. That changed in 1937, when a man named Delmare Nicholson, known across Orange County as Radio Nick, bought the island and fell completely, eccentrically, in love with it. This was the first great romance in our story. Nicholson was a local celebrity, one of the first men in the region to build functioning radio sets, and the proud owner of his own repair shop. But Radio Nick didn't just want to own the island, he wanted to become it. He moved onto the island with his wife and a pet crane. He planted mango and lime trees. He cleared sections of the jungle interior and built a small working farm, for he renamed the place Idle Bay Isle and declared it his personal tropical paradise, a one-man kingdom in the middle of a Florida lake. By the 1940s, he was hosting Girl Scout leaders, local dignitaries, and VIPs on weekend retreats. Radio Nick had essentially created a private resort out of sheer force of personality. But like all great romantic stories, this one couldn't last. By the early 1950s, Nicholson had sold the island and moved on. A group of investors purchased it with enormous ambitions: campsites, residential developments, a whole lakeside community. They called the project the Bay Isle Club. The honeymoon phase was short. Almost none of those plans materialized. The only structure left standing on the island was the modest home Radio Nick had built with his own hand. The island sat there, jilted, overgrown, waiting. And in the mid-1960s, Walt Disney was quietly orchestrating one of the greatest land acquisitions in American business history. Through a carefully constructed web of shell corporations, each with deliberately bland names to avoid tipping off sellers, Disney agents were buying up enormous tracts of Central Florida real estate. The goal was Walt's grand vision, an East Coast expansion unlike anything ever built. Not just a theme park, an entire experimental prototype community of tomorrow. Epcot, a functioning city of the future. As the story goes, Walt Disney himself was aboard a small plane surveying the landscape when he looked down at Bay Lake and spotted the island at its center. And just like that, he was smitten. By 1965, through those same shell corporations, Disney had taken legal ownership of the land surrounding Bay Lake, island included. The total price tag for all the Central Florida land acquisitions, approximately $5 million for 27,000 acres, one of the greatest real estate deals in modern American history. For a brief, glorious moment, this was the perfect relationship. Walt had his land, he had his island, he had his dream. Then Walt Disney died in December 1966. and everything changed. Walt's original Epcot vision died with him, but the company pressed forward with building Walt Disney World as a themed entertainment complex, and the island remained a critical piece of the puzzle. In early master plans shared publicly through the late 1960s, the island appeared under a thrilling new name, Blackbeard's Island. This was Disney's big pitch, its love letter to the project. The concept called for massive wooden forts, on a heavy pirate motif inspired by the recently released Disney comedy Blackbeard's Ghost. Moonlight boat cruises and children's adventure playgrounds spread across an island expanded to 11.5 acres. It was bold, it was expensive, it was exactly the kind of grand theatrical gesture that sweeps you off your feet. During construction of Walt Disney World, Disney dredged approximately 55,000 cubic yards of soil from the newly built Seven Seas Lagoon and deposited it onto the island to expand its footprint. That's a commitment. That's buying the expensive jewelry before the first date is even confirmed. But Walt Disney World's construction had already run catastrophically over budget. By the time the park opened in 1971, the Blackbeard's Island project had consumed over $324,000 in early development costs, and still wasn't built. It was quietly shelved, labeled Future Phase on internal documents, and marked Coming Soon on guest maps. The island sat on those maps like an unanswered text message. By late 1972, Disney made a decision familiar to anyone who has ever settled in a relationship. They scaled back their expectations dramatically and called it a choice. The grand pirate fortress was gone. In its place, a picnic island with some tropical plants and a fake shipwreck. Treasure Island officially opened on April 8, 1974, named loosely after the classic 1950 Disney film. The centerpiece was a replica shipwreck called the Walrus, which children could climb. There was buried treasure in the sand, skeleton decorations, cast members in pirate costumes, and over 150 birds, mammals, and reptiles housed in interactive exhibits woven throughout the lush landscaping. It was charming. It was unusual. It was also, in the words of one historian, pretty bare bones. There was exactly one guest bathroom on the entire island. Everything else was open air. The elaborate forts, the wreck of the Hispaniola, the Spyglass Hill playground. All of it had been promised in early promotional maps, and none of it was ever built. Disney claimed the attraction was profitable within its first year of operation. So they kept it running, added a snack bar in 1975, expanded the animal exhibits, and by 1978, officially dropped the pirate theme entirely. The island was rebranded as Discovery Island, a zoological and botanical sanctuary. And that's when this complicated relationship finally found its footing. For 2 decades, the Discovery Island was genuinely extraordinary. It became one of the largest walk-through aviaries in the world, earned full accreditation from the American Zoo and Aquarium Association, and housed over 150 species of animals, including Galapagos, tortoises, alligators, miniature deer, marmosets, flamingos, and dozens of exotic bird species. Animal trainers built deep, years-long bonds with individual animals. Birds trained to fly free across the open sky and return voluntarily to their handler's arm. Guests could only reach the island by boat, which gave it an almost mythic quality. It was wild in a way that the rest of the perfectly manicured Disney resort deliberately was not. The pathways were uneven. The trees were enormous. The animals were real. But even in this golden era, darkness crept in. In 1987, on Discovery Island was home to the last living Dusky Seaside Sparrow on Earth. A small, brownish bird, not particularly beautiful, not particularly famous, but the absolute last member of its entire species. It died that year on this island, and the Dusky Seaside Sparrow was officially added to the list of extinct animals, forever gone. Its final home was an island that would itself soon be forgotten. Then came 1989, the scandal. Walt Disney World and 5 of its employees were charged with 16 separate state and federal counts of animal cruelty relating to the treatment of wild vultures on the island. The press coverage was extensive and damaging. Disney corporate went completely silent. Employees were ordered to say nothing. When the dust settled, and the implicated workers were demoted, and Disney paid a settlement of $95,000 to have all charges dropped and avoid a courtroom. No public apology, no press conference, just a quiet check and a new set of internal protocols. In 1995, Disney publicly announced Disney's Animal Kingdom, a full-scale theme park that would do everything Discovery Island did, but bigger, louder, and with a multi-billion-dollar budget behind it. This was the other person entering the picture. Discovery Island staff were called into a meeting. The message from management was delivered with the particular cruelty of someone who has already made up their mind, but doesn't want to admit it. Animal Kingdom is going to be huge. The best zoo professionals in the world are being recruited. You shouldn't bother applying. But don't worry, Discovery Island isn't going anywhere. Your jobs are secure. Disney's Animal Kingdom opened on April 22, 1998. Almost immediately, Discovery Island's attendance dropped sharply. But former cast members noticed something suspicious. Disney had quietly removed the island from park maps, stopped advertising it at the boat docks, and pulled it from printed park tickets entirely. Guests who didn't already know it existed had no way of finding it. Whether this was deliberate sabotage or simple corporate neglect, the effect was the same. On March 26, 1999, Disney announced that Discovery Island would permanently close. The final operating day, April 8, 1999, exactly 25 years to the day it first opened. Disney's official statement to the Orlando Sentinel was cold and clinical. Our guests have so many more choices, and they are choosing other things. For the people who had spent years on that island, who had built careers, formed deep bonds with animals, and poured genuine love into the place, the announcement was shattering. One former manager described spending his final months on the island hosting resume writing parties in his office for his staff, while simultaneously trying to find safe homes for the animals he had cared for. Most of the exotic birds were shipped to zoos around the world. Some reportedly went to a zoo in Africa. One former bird trainer was eventually reunited with his closest bird years later, the animal now living at his private home. And then Disney did something nobody expected. They left. No demolition crew, no redevelopment announcement, no press release about future plans. They simply locked the gate, got in the boat, and never came back. Within months, jungle began reclaiming the pathways. Wildlife moved into the buildings. The massive aviary canopy, without maintenance, began collapsing onto itself. In 2005, a photographer named Shane Perez swam 300 feet across Bay Lake in the dark to reach the island. What he found inside looked like a set from a horror film. Fluorescent lights still burning inside decaying buildings, snakes preserved in Diet Coke bottles, guest maps still pinned to bulletin boards, Coke machines still stocked behind the rotting concession counter. The power had never been disconnected. When Perez eventually released his photos, years later, after the Florida trespassing statute of limitations had expired, they made local and national news. It was the first time anyone had seen inside the park since its closure. More explorers followed. In 2017, the first daylight footage of the island since 1999 emerged online, shot in 4K. The images were staggering. Guest washrooms had completely caved in. The animal hospital had lost entire exterior walls. Tree roots had fractured the concrete walkways. The jungle had consumed the island so completely that the only evidence of the former animal exhibits were small informational plaques, still standing, still readable, in the middle of the wilderness. By 2020, Disney installed a hidden camera surveillance system on the island. When a Florida man attempted to camp there for a week, Disney contacted the Orange County Sheriff's Office. But what followed was a genuinely surreal scene. Boats on the water, helicopters overhead, law enforcement officers with guns drawn, cutting through jungle with machetes on an abandoned Disney theme park. The man was caught leaving by boat. He paid a fine and was permanently banned from Walt Disney World for life. Disney still said nothing publicly. Today, Discovery Island remains exactly as it was left in 1999. If you take a water taxi from Disney's lakeside resorts, you can still see the old entrance structure from the water. You can still see the 1974 shipwreck decaying on the beach. The jungle canopy is so thick now that from the air, it looks like untouched wilderness, with no trace of the pathways, the aviaries, the animal exhibits, or the people who dedicated years of their lives to making it extraordinary. The park has now been abandoned longer than it was ever open. It housed the last member of an extinct species. It survived a federal animal cruelty scandal. It was promised a glorious future by the most powerful entertainment company on Earth, then quietly discarded the moment something shinier came along. Discovery Island wasn't a roller coaster. It wasn't a headline attraction. It was something rarer. A genuinely wild, genuinely beautiful place inside one of the most artificial destinations ever built. And Disney walked away from it without a single word of explanation to the people who loved it most. That's not magic. That's corporate amnesia. And that island, rotting, silent, and completely real, is the proof. If this story gripped you, you can subscribe to the History Chronicle right now. Every week we pull back the curtain on the real history behind the world's most powerful institutions. Drop a comment below. Should Disney restore Discovery Island, or let the jungle take it completely? I read every single response. And stay tuned, because next episode, we're going somewhere even darker. You won't want to miss it. The History Chronicle, where history doesn't ask permission.